People like to obsess over mechanical keyboards. Something about the clickiness of the keys really gets them going. I think it's mostly a feel thing, but there is something to be said about the accuracy of those switches. It's not really just about annoying your coworkers. Hey! Shut up over there! When you're pressing down on that key, the computer knows that you meant that press. Mechanical keyboards are objectively better than membrane keyboards. I think we can all agree on that. So then, why do most controllers use membrane buttons? What if there was a controller that used mechanical switches, like a keyboard? You see where I'm going with it? This video is brought to you by Satisfye and their brand new Ice Edition Zen Grip bundle. Look at how pretty and translucent it is. Satisfye makes my favorite Switch grip because of that offset right handle so you don't strain your hand trying to reach those buttons. Yikes. The bundle comes with the grip itself, the travel case, the fashionable shoulder strap, a 3-foot USB-C cable for portable chargers with a 56 ohm resistor in it, 2 black and 2 white thumb pads, and the cool Ice Edition controller rails. Of course, there's also a Switch Lite version. It ships November 10th, but if you pre-order it right now, you can get it for 15% off, and if you use the code WolfDen10, spelled like that, you get an additional 10% off. So check it out at satisfye.com or in the link in the description below. So this is the Sunwaytech H511. It was brought to my attention by Roku on Twitter, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I've heard of Sunwaytech before, and I couldn't put my finger on where. If you look them up now, you pretty much only see this controller and the white version of this controller, which was sold out at the time when I was trying to buy this. But turns out they also made this generic Bluetooth controller that I bought way back and ripped in half in one of my videos. I'm glad that they've moved away from just rebranding AliExpress stuff and have moved on to developing their own products. At least I hope that's what they've done. So, the SG H511 is a Bluetooth wireless controller that works on the Nintendo Switch, Windows, iOS, Android, and Linux. It only works wired on Switch and Windows. For the purposes of this video, we're pretty much only using it on the Switch. This is mostly a Switch channel. It's really cool that it works on PC, but I don't see PC users switching from keyboard and mouse anytime soon. Also, all the information you're gonna get here about how the buttons feel and whatnot, it's gonna be the same on Windows anyway. Inside the very minimal box is just the controller, the manual, and the USB-C cable, which is about 4 feet in length. Not great, but I guess not terrible either. The manual tells you all different ways you can pair the controller wirelessly. There's a lot here, but luckily it also pairs by plugging it straight into the dock. So mine got hooked up perfectly fine first try, no problems. The big draw here is that the face buttons are mechanical, just like a mechanical keyboard. Traditionally, buttons on a controller have little silicone or rubber feeling membranes under them, and you squish the button down and it interrupts the circuit, and that's what sends the signal to the console to say, okay, the button was just pressed. For the most part, this is just fine, but someone at Sunwaytek decided, nah, we can do better, and they pretty much just jammed keyboard switches onto the board of this controller. For you keyboard nerds out there, these are red switches. I don't think these are Cherry MX red switches, or else they probably would have said so, but I'd imagine they're supposed to feel very similar to the Cherry MX reds. The Cherry MX red is what I actually have in my Keychron. To my understanding, the reds have less resistance and are lighter feeling. They have less of that clicky feel you might get from one of those old school Dells or whatever keyboard they use in the beginning of Perfect Dark. They didn't stop with just the face buttons though. The D-pad uses similar switches to an arcade stick. It's very clicky and very precise. It presses straight down to the board for an instant hit. On the surface, it uses the same D-pad style as the new Xbox controllers, or an Elite controller, which I'm sure is better for fighting games, but I would have much rather preferred a traditional plus sign style D-pad with these accurate arcade style switches. But then again, I'm just over here playing Mario games. They've also opted for magnet sensors for analog triggers. This is completely useless for the Switch, as the Switch doesn't register analog inputs, but would be more useful for things like racing games on PC. Almost every game I play would be better off having mechanical triggers instead of analog triggers. Shooters, for example, would be much better off with fast-acting mechanical triggers. But I understand why they'd want to include that sort of functionality. This controller also has motion controls, although you should probably just pretend like it doesn't, because they're not great. The only way I could describe them is floaty. It's not very accurate. It feels like the movement sort of lags behind. For a game like Mario Galaxy, which requires constant motion, I would not want to use this controller. I've tested this controller with a few different games just to see if I can feel a difference with the mechanical buttons. And the first game that I tried was Mario Maker, because that's a game that I'm extensively familiar with, and any changes in the controller should be reflected in my playstyle. The lack of a plus style D-pad really kills the experience for me. The mechanical switches in the face buttons actually feel awesome, but the shape of the controller gets in the way to the point where it ruins the whole concept. In Mario Maker, you hold X or Y to run and press A or B to jump. With this giant bulbous grip and this insane indent that the face buttons sit in, rolling your thumb over to that B button is not comfortable at all. You really have to jam it in there. The A button feels less weird, but it's still pretty weird, which is unfortunate because this is the button where a mechanical press would really make a difference. All right, I get it. I'm like the only one who cares this much about 2D Mario games. I already talked about how the cursor in Mario Galaxy didn't feel right, but the rest of the controls felt fine. Even using the motion controls to spin was fine, but I still wouldn't use this controller for Mario Galaxy. I tried Rogue Company because the Xbox style layout might lend itself well to a competitive shooter, and it does. The thumbsticks are pretty much identical to Xbox thumbsticks. They feel just as tight and premium. The analog triggers are okay too. Rogue Company actually has really good motion controls. I like the setting where the motion controls only kick in when you aim down the sights, so you can quickly adjust your aim by moving the controller. This actually works quite well with the Sunwaytech controller. I guess it only has a problem with constant movement, so overall, this is pretty good for Rogue Company. It's just unfortunate that this isn't really a game that would make great use of the mechanical buttons, you know, the whole gimmick behind this controller. I don't play a lot of fighting games, but I do play a lot of Smash. Smash Brothers doesn't utilize the D-pad, so that kind of defeats the purpose of this optimized D-pad for fighting games, but the rest of the controller feels great. It still suffers from a similar problem where rolling your thumb over to the A or B buttons feels weird, so doing the short hop aerial macro feels a little weird. And I use tap jump, so I pretty much exclusively press the B and A buttons. So honestly, I'd much rather stick to using my GameCube controller. But I could see this being really exciting to someone who uses a Pro controller for Smash, assuming the grips don't get in their way too much. By the time I got to play Mario 35, I ran into a bit of a problem. The face buttons and the D-pad are very easy to pop out. I assume this is in order to mimic a customizable mechanical keyboard, which has keys that are very easy to just take off. I popped the D-pad off once because it's just itching to be popped off, and after that, it became incredibly weak, to the point where I couldn't even use it. It popped out pretty much every time I tried to use it, absolutely ruining my win rate on Mario 35. Oh, no! It popped out! All right, I think I fixed it. Oh my god, it popped out again. Oh my. I'm sure I could super glue it, but why should I really have to do that? I think this D-pad design is just very delicate. It has a very wide surface and a very narrow fulcrum. So pressing too hard on the ends, especially after popping it out once, will basically cause it to fail. It's at this point that this controller really starts to show its cheapness. I decided since this controller's whole gimmick is being fast and accurate, I would do an input lag test. And the results of that test are pretty unremarkable. It has basically the same input lag as a wireless Pro controller. However, I would say the difference is that the Sunwaytek controller requires a lot of travel in order to register a full press, whereas the Pro controller and most other membrane-style controllers have a short distance to travel. So, while the input lag between pressing the button and the Switch recognizing that press is low, the physical lag between your thumb initiating the press and finishing the press is longer. So, in the process of trying to develop a solution to the typical membrane-style buttons in a normal controller, they may have just created a different problem. It's a really cool idea. If you're the type of person who maybe built your own keyboard, or at least spent a couple of hours researching which style of Cherry MX switches you wanted in your controller, I would encourage you to give this controller a shot. You might find a use case for it that I couldn't think of. Maybe you are a fighting game guy that can benefit from the fast accuracy of these mechanical button presses. I just couldn't find a benefit to using these mechanical switches over the traditional membrane-style buttons. In fact, it seems to me like a detriment to have to travel all the way down to hit the switch on the button. Honestly, I'd prefer the Xbox style. It's still a membrane, but it feels more clicky. The positive is that this controller is only $31, so it's not gonna break the bank to give it a shot. Its cheapness shows in some aspects. All right. But having red mechanical switches for buttons probably costs a decent amount to develop. They could have charged a lot more for this controller. It's probably good that they didn't though, or else I would like it significantly less. So what do you guys think about putting mechanical keyboard switches inside of a controller? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is going to be a problem for some games? Do you have a use case where this could be good that maybe I didn't think of? Leave it in the comments below. At me on Twitter, any and all this other social media garbage. I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that it's at least interesting. Anyway, we got new videos all the time, at least once a week. Make sure you're subscribed and you got the notifications on so you know when those new videos go up. You can't rely on YouTube's suggested algorithm on your homepage. You gotta look at that subscription feed, buddy. And a special thanks to Satisfye for helping support this channel. Make sure you check out those grips at the link in the description below. Our podcast is back at youtube.com/WolfDen Podcast. We also do it live on twitch.tv/WolfDen. And I'm also live there playing games all the time. You should give that a follow, turn on notifications there. I'm live tonight. But of course, the most important thing that you can do to help us, and the easiest thing, is just subscribe and share this video with a friend. A friend who maybe is into fighting games, or maybe is just into mechanical keyboards, and they play some Switch stuff, and this might be cool to them. Again, it's pretty cheap. So there it goes. That D-pad just fell off again. You know what? Thank you very much. Have a good week. I'm done talking about the controller.